Hello, good evening, and welcome back. Tory conference, national living wage to rise to £10.50, says Chancellor. Which, on the face of it, is of course a very non-conservative proposition. In fact, if you want to raise the minimum wage, why should there be an upper limit to it? Well, you understand that of course there would, because otherwise you're putting people out of work, in which case, well, why is there one at all? Surely then you're not allowing younger people, most likely, people without experience, in order to get started, to gain the experience that they need, because people aren't going to take a risk on them to earn that much. Which is also why sales is increasingly becoming the only opportunity, and why that's my job now, because if I don't have experience, that's the only job I can get, because then it's not a risk to my employer. So I encourage that to other people as well. But of course, a living wage for the entire country, or minimum wage as this is becoming, doesn't make any sense at all, considering that the cost of living varies by place. And if we look at this article from ABC Finance, they say the average cost of living per household in the UK, the North East at the lowest, at just under £21,000 a year, and then maximum in London, just under £31,000 a year. It's about 50% difference, 1.5 times in London. They go on to show other things of income after annual household spend. Birmingham at the top with 12,000, and Chichester at the bottom with negative 1,676. So, with that in mind, showing that minimum wage across the board doesn't mean anything, let's see why they're doing it. And the point is optics. They're basically thinking, well, hey, can we make it low enough so that by real terms we're not actually increasing anything, but still have it seem to be impressive, and therefore we'll win the votes of people who don't understand, which seems to be what they're doing. So they're not actually playing for policy, they're playing for optics, which is understandable and a cheeky tactic, but hey, it's a bold move, Cotton, see if it pays off. So he will also lower the age threshold for those who qualify from 25 to 21, eventually. Speaking to a packed hall at the Tory party conference, Mr Javid said the policy would help the next generation of go-getters to get ahead. It obviously wouldn't, because it's just putting people out of work. That's why places like Amazon, after a while, saying, hey, you should raise your wage because you're not paying people enough. They go, fine, and then they eventually do. So what's their next move? To lobby the government to raise it nationally? Well, of course, because they know that they can deal with the prices, because they can afford to have, whatever, like a 20% cut in their staff. And they know that smaller stores can't, in which case they get a bigger monopoly, because monopolies aren't possible without government assistance. If you have a small government, you're not going to get a monopoly, but if you have a larger one, then you are, because that's what communism becomes, it's just a monopoly, understandably. So they say the current rate for over 25s is £8.21, but the Living Wage Foundation says there should already be £9 across the UK and £10.55 for those in London, so they do differentiate a little bit, but not enough if you wish to reflect the country, in which case you should have it back to county level, like states in America. Or, better yet, have it even more individual, so it's a case-by-case basis, so it's actually by individual instead. Wouldn't that make a lot of sense? Oh, but hang on, that means getting rid of the minimum wage entirely. It just seems to make sense from every angle. Earlier this year, Labour pledged to raise the national living wage to £10 an hour in 2020, and to include all workers under 18 who currently get a minimum wage of £4.35. Yeah. Yes, exactly. So, somebody you were thinking, well, okay, so here we have this 15-year-old, or we have this 25-year-old who's got a bit more experience and maybe a degree. Who are we going to hire for this £10 an hour job? 15-year-old, 25-year-old? Well, we're going to go for the more experienced, and considering we can't afford to pay out that much, we're going to have to hire fewer people, in which case we're not going to hire those, we're not going to hire the next generation of go-getters to get ahead. That's what we're not going to do. So again, it doesn't help. Labour Shadow Chancellor John Communist called Mr Javid's announcement a pathetic attempt at catch-up. I think that's a hard hit, because he's saying that they're trying to catch up to Labour, which is one of the gravest insults you can cast, in my opinion. Mr Javid also confirmed £25 billion for road projects. That's most likely covered by car tax anyway, so that's fair enough. £220 million for bus improvements. I'm always wary of what that says, but the same with road projects. If it's building more roads, fair enough. When it's road improvements, which basically means speed bumps, pedestrian crossings, one-way systems, priority traffic, bus lanes, then no, it doesn't help at all. and £5 billion for digital infrastructure in his speech, along with extra funding for youth services. It greatly concerns me when a supposed conservative government wants to increase spending. That's not very conservative. What's happened to the right-wingers? The Tories have made a raft of spending announcements so far at their party conference in Manchester. I haven't been able to get to because I've been working, unfortunately. But the conference has been overshadowed by allegations that Boris Johnson squeezed the thigh of a journalist during a lunch in 1999, which the Prime Minister denies. Yes, yesterday's video. But it gets better. Charlotte Edwards made the claim in a column in the Sunday Times and said the PM did the same to another woman in the room, but the other woman, the BBC's Laura Kunsberg, said a rumour had been circulating at the conference. The other woman was journalist Mary Wakefield, the wife of the PM's chief advisor Dominic Cummings, but she released a statement saying nothing like this ever happened to me. It's like Kavanaugh all over again, that the one corroborating witness actually denies that it ever happened. So good, that's gone then, but you're going to keep bringing it up, aren't you? So, with the Prime Minister looking on from the audience, Mr Jabber told his party the living wage pledge would make the UK the first major economy in the world to end low pay altogether and to increase unemployment. Well done. And then, of course, when you raise the minimum wage, you're then going to raise the cost of living, in which case the minimum wage doesn't mean anything. Unless you're trying to get in a load of exports, in which case the cost of living won't catch up with the rise in the wage. Unfortunately, in that case, you're going to have to send your unskilled people away in order for them to get the skills to then come back. Unless you think your universities are going to be great, but then again, who's going to do the lower paid jobs? Unless you're relying on automation, in which case that could work, and then you're forward thinking. Maybe it's a bit too quick to do that, but I suppose raising the minimum wage is a better way to do it instead of Andrew Yang's freedom dividend. In which case, yes, maybe, but then that means that you're going to make higher education a necessity, and then you're just going to be inculcating, whatever, you're going to be needing the youth to take longer in order to develop their skills, instead of being ready to work at 12, like historically. These days it's closer to 18, and now you're going to say, well, then you're going to have to finish university, so it's going to be close to 21. As in, the youth are going to have to be invested in for even longer before they can start paying back to the economy. At which point, not only are they costing more, but then because they're taking longer to be taught and then let into the workforce, it's then going to take even longer for them to pay that back. So that is quite a large investment into the future. And unless you can have a very stable government until then, that's highly unreliable. So let's see, they say it's clear it's the Conservatives who are the real party of Labour, we are the Workers' Party, he told the delegates. Don't pretend to be something you're not. Just get Brexit done, that's all that matters. So, let's see. Business Group sounded a note of caution about the potential effects of the policy. The CEO of the British Retail Consortium, BRC, Helen Dixonson, said there was nothing wrong with targeting higher wages, but all of this adds to the cumulative pressures you have seen take their toll on the retail sector. And this is similar that, yes, if you're then also going to include marginal tax rates, again, you don't seem to be a right-wing party in the slightest. And what's that? You want to support a nationalised health service. Again, you're leaning much more towards the socialist side of things. But, hey, maybe I'm far too right to understand what a centrist is. The TEC, meanwhile, said the Chancellor's promise should be taken with a huge bucket of salt. This pledge would be overwhelmed by a no-deal Brexit. General Secretary Francis O'Grady added, if we leave the EU without a deal, jobs will be lost, wages will fall, and our public services will suffer. On the contrary, I think the only way of this working is with leaving the EU, and quite possibly without a deal, because we're going to have to rely on so many imports in order to make a minimum wage functional. That seems to be the best bet, because then you have WTO terms and you're not just limited to the EU, and then you can import from poor countries, in which case you've got time then for your minimum wage to take effect. So that's probably your best bet. It's not the move I would have taken, but if it's the one you're going with, then see it through. Director of the organisation, Catherine Chapman, said nearly 6,000 employers across the UK were already going further than the legal minimum and paying a real living wage that covers the cost of living. Well, yes, of course they are, because they are rewarding hard work. The thing then is, of course, you can't reward a good employee, because if you have your quota which you can spend on somebody, maybe between £7 and £10 an hour, and at the moment you could pay 7 if they're under 25, and you could go 10, then the better working person, you can increase their wage up to that 10. But when you increase it then all to 10.50, well, you probably won't keep 2 people, you only keep 1. But even if you could keep both, you have to pay both of them at the same, and you haven't got any room for manoeuvre, in which case you're not rewarding hard work, you're rewarding less work. So, let's see what Simon Jack says, because he seemed to have something worth saying, actually. But he says, I guess that some businesses will worry this is the return of the magic money tree, but with them being asked to grow it. And there was the response from one UK trade body boss to such a Jevons announcement that he would give 4 million workers a pay rise. Yep. Over the next 5 years. And I agree. Where do you intend this money to come from? And I say the best bet is probably imports. With that in mind, let's wrap up, shall we? So, Javid also reiterated his government's position of leaving the EU on Halloween. We are leaving the European Union, he said. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of days. 31 days, deal or no deal. You get, it's not Neil Fielding, is it? Neil. You know, Neil. Deal or no deal. Get Mr. Blobby in there as well. Why not? So, and he said a Brexit red tape challenge would be launched, letting businesses tell the government what rules they want changing after Brexit through an online portal. Yeah, good luck with getting that to work. I'm far too cynical for that. But anyway, as always, what do you guys think? Do you think this is actually a good play because they're going to rely on imports and they're going to rely on optics to make it seem like they're actually helping when they're not really doing anything? Or do you think that this is just a load of hogwash and you can see straight through it because the optics are going to fail because they're going to be seen as trying to copy Labour, and for people who actually understand, then they're still doing jack shit. Well, if anything, they're doing a negative by increasing the living wage, which as they're then lowering the age, it becomes a minimum wage. So let me know what you guys think. Always intrigued to hear what you guys have to say. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time. Have a good one.